Macbeth, Act 4, Scene 2. This scene finds us in Fife, at Macduff's castle, and we're told that Lady Macduff enters along with her son and Ross. Of course, Ross is a character who we've met before. He is one of the Thanes. Lady Macduff asks Ross, what had he done to make him fly the land? Lady Macduff has obviously been told that her husband, Macduff, has fled. And remember, Shakespeare often has this technique of starting scenes after the conversation proper has begun. It sort of engages the audience's interest straight away. Ross says, you must have patience, madam. Now, Ross's response here clearly demonstrates that Lady Macduff is angry with this news that her husband has fled Scotland. Lady Macduff really isn't impressed. He had none. In other words, my husband had no patience. His flight was madness. When our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors. Lady Macduff clearly thinks that her husband has run away out of cowardice. It makes you wonder how strong their relationship was. Maybe she's just speaking in anger and frustration, because of course she is also living through the tyranny of Macbeth's reign. We, the audience, are expected to understand that the reason Macduff has fled without telling his wife is because he had to act quickly. He had no time to share his plan with his wife, and you also get the impression that because Macduff knows what Macbeth is like, he has to act secretly. But I've just raised this issue here, and I'll go into more detail about this in Act 4, Scene 3. Although Macduff is suspicious of Macbeth, he underestimates just how evil Macbeth can be, given the fact that he leaves his wife and children unprotected. Ross responds, you know not. In other words, you can't call your husband a traitor. You know not whether it was his wisdom or his fear. You don't know whether or not your husband ran away out of fear or because it was a wise thing to do. Lady Macbeth's having none of it. Ross is trying to speak up for Macduff. Lady Macduff, she's having none of it. Wisdom? To leave his wife, to leave his babes, his mansion, and his titles in a place from whence himself does fly? He loves us not. He wants the natural touch. In other words, he lacks natural feelings. For the poor wren, the most diminutive of birds, will fight her young ones in her nest against the owl. This is further dialogue which gives us the impression that Lady Macduff looks upon her husband's actions as cowardice, because she's saying, even when a little bird like a wren is faced with an enormous bird of prey like an owl, she will fight to protect her young ones and her family. My husband can't even do that. He's being a coward. All is the fear and nothing is the love. As little is the wisdom where the flight so runs against all reason. Lady Macduff is not convinced by Ross's idea that maybe Macduff's gone away because it was the wise thing to do. She's saying, but how can you call it wisdom when what he's done goes against all reason? Ross says, my dearest cuz. So clearly Ross is related to Lady Macduff in some way. My dearest cuz, my dearest cousin. I pray you, school yourself, control yourself, just calm down a bit. But for your husband, he is noble, wise, judicious, and best knows the fits of the season. Don't call him a coward. Don't call him stupid. Macduff is noble, wise, judicious, in other words, makes good judgment, and best knows the fits of the season. He is reading how things are going on in Scotland, and he's acting because he thinks it's for the best. Ross then says, I dare not speak much further. The reason he says this is, remember that Macbeth is paying servants in the houses to spy. Ross doesn't know who might be listening in to this conversation. That's why he says, I dare not speak much further. But cruel are the times when we are traitors and do not know ourselves, when we hold rumour from what we fear, yet know not what we fear, but float upon a wild and violent sea, each way and none. This is another one of those examples in the play where the language spoken by the characters gives us an insight into just how awful Macbeth's reign is. What Ross is saying here is, and it's confirming what's been said before, we don't know who to trust. We do not know what we fear. We hold rumour from what we fear. He describes the times as cruel, and he uses this really apt metaphor for Macbeth's reign, that they are floating upon a wild and violent sea. Really good metaphor for the description of what Scotland is like under Macbeth. It is a wild and violent sea. I take my leave of you, Ross says. I've got to go now. Shall not be long, but I'll be here again. I won't be away for long. I will come back. Things at the worst will cease, or else climb upward to what they were before. There is a sense of optimism in what Ross says here. And again, I think it's Shakespeare putting lines like this in just to reassure the audience that it'll all be all right in the end. He says, things at the worst will cease. You know, the bad things will stop and we'll get back to the good times again. My pretty cousin, he says, blessing upon you. Lady Macduff, fathered he is, and yet he's fatherless. She's talking about her son, of course. Yes, he has a father, but where is that father now? He may as well not have one at all. Ross is getting quite emotional at this stage, and I think Ross's emotion again further conveys how awful things are in Scotland at the moment. He says, I am so much a fool. Should I stay longer, it would be my disgrace and your discomfort. In other words, if I stay here much longer, I'm going to burst into tears and make a fool of myself, and you'll be embarrassed to see me, a man, in tears in front of you. Hence, I take my leave at once, and off Ross goes before he can burst into tears. He doesn't like leaving his relatives in this terrible time. He doesn't like being apart from them, but he doesn't want to hang round any longer, because remember, Ross is one of the Thanes. If he spends too long in Macduff's castle, that's going to arouse Macbeth's suspicions, because remember, Macbeth does not trust Macduff. Therefore, if another lord is spending time with Lady Macduff, that might suggest that they too are plotting against Macbeth, so Ross can't stick around. Lady Macduff and her son are now alone on stage, and Lady Macduff says, Sirrah, your father's dead, and what will you do now? How will you live? When she says your father's dead, she's not meaning, of course, that Macduff is literally dead. It's like she's disowning Macduff, her husband. It's like she's saying he's dead to us. She's clearly not been reassured by what Ross has had to say. And it's like she's saying to her son, your father is dead to us, you'd better get used to him not being around. She says to her son, how will you live? And the son replies, as birds do, mother. The son is quite a lowly character. Obviously, he's the son of a lord, so he's got some status. But as a child, you would look upon him as one of the lowlier characters in the play. And as is so often the case in Shakespeare, Shakespeare gives wise words to the lowly characters. And we see this in this cheeky interaction between Lady Macduff and her son. She is trying to convince her son that his father is a coward and dead to them. The son is actually defending his father. Lady Macduff says, what, with worms and flies? And the son says, with what I get, I mean, and so do they. Lady Macduff replies, poor bird, thou dost never fear the net, nor lime, the pitfall, nor the gin. The son says, why should I, mother? Poor birds, they are not set for. And this is the key line in this. My father is not dead, for all you're saying. So he, this child, this young boy, is standing up to his mother and saying, you're wrong. He's defending his father. My father is not dead, for all you're saying. Lady Macduff says, yes, he is dead. How wilt thou do for a father? To which he cheekily replies, nay, how will you do for a husband? Lady Macduff, in her next line, shows her opinion of men in general. Why, I can buy me 20 at any market. The son says, then you'll buy 'em to sell 'em again. Again, a very cheeky response for this son towards his mother. All right, well, if you can pick up men cheaply at market, you'll soon get rid of them again. Lady Macduff says, thou speakest with all thy wit, and yet in faith with wit enough for thee. The son then says, was my father a traitor, mother? To which she replies, aye, that he was. The son wants clarification. What is a traitor? Lady Macduff says, why, one that swears and lies. The son says, and be all traitors that do so? Lady Macduff says, every one that does so is a traitor and must be hanged. I mean, when you think she's talking about her husband here, she genuinely sees him as a traitor. This man that she's spent her life with, had children with, and now she's saying traitors like your father, my husband, must be hanged. The son says, and must they all be hanged that swear and lie? Lady Macduff says, every one. The son says, who must hang them? Lady Macduff, why, the honest men. The son says, then the liars and swearers are fools, for there are liars and swearers enough to beat the honest men and hang them up. Lady Macduff says, now God help thee, poor monkey, but how wilt thou do for a father? You know, that's enough of the cheekiness. In all seriousness, how are you going to cope without a father? The son says, if he were dead, you'd weep for him. So you're not in tears at the moment, mother, so he can't really be dead. If you would not, it were a good sign that I should quickly have a new father. Again, a little bit of cheekiness here. If you're not crying, maybe it means you've got another bloke lined up that you're going to marry, and I'm going to have a new dad. Hence, Lady Macduff says, poor prattler, how thou talk'st, though you are cheeky, how you do go on. Then a messenger enters. Now, interestingly, and I think this works really well, in a number of versions of Macbeth that I've seen, this messenger is actually Lennox. Remember, Lennox as a lord already has his deep suspicions about Macbeth and is turning against him. Shakespeare just has this as a random messenger, but as you do so often see in Shakespeare plays, the minor roles are sometimes filled in by some of the bigger characters, and Lennox would fit really well here, given that he no longer trusts Macbeth. Anyway, this is what the messenger says. Bless you, fair dame. I am not to you known. In other words, you don't know me. Though in your state of honour I am perfect. I doubt some danger does approach you nearly. Now, when Shakespeare uses the word doubt here, it actually means suspect. I suspect that some danger is approaching you. This messenger, whoever he is, has clearly got wind of the fact that Macbeth is sending assassins to kill Macduff's family. And so he's giving Lady Macduff a warning. I doubt, I suspect, I fear that some danger does approach you nearly. If you will take a homely man's advice, a humble man's advice, be not found here. Get away from here. Hence with your little ones. Get away from here. Leave here with your children. To fright you thus, methinks I am too savage. You must be quite frightened by my sudden appearance and this warning. To do worse to you were fell cruelty. If I didn't come and speak to you, that would be cruel, which is too nigh your person. Heaven preserve you, I dare abide no longer. I don't dare stay here any longer. I'm off, and he goes, but he's left this very clear warning. Get away from here with your children. There is danger approaching. Lady Macduff is obviously quite surprised by this person suddenly appearing who she doesn't know and giving her this warning. She says, whither should I fly? Where do I go? I have done no harm. But I remember now I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable, and to do good sometime accounted dangerous folly. There's a little bit of a paradox in what Lady Macduff says here, and again, this is language that communicates how bad Scotland has become under Macbeth's reign, because she says, I remember now I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable, to do harm, to do evil, is seen as a good thing. Lady Macduff is saying, I've not done any harm, I've done nothing wrong, why would anybody want to kill me? Oh, but yeah, I'm living in a time where to do evil deeds is often seen as good. Why then, alas, do I put up that womanly defence to say I have done no harm? And at that point we are told, enter murderers. Macbeth's hired assassins are now on the scene. She doesn't know who these people are. She says, what are these faces? And one of the murderers says, where is your husband? Lady Macduff says, I hope in no place so unsanctified were such as thou mayest find him. Now this is a rather interesting line, I think, because for most of this scene, Lady Macduff has been saying about her husband that he's a traitor, that he's done a foolish thing by running away, that he clearly doesn't love his family for leaving them like this. But when this murderer comes in, she defends her husband. When the murderer says, where is he? Lady Macduff says, I hope in no place so unsanctified, in other words, so unholy, where someone such as you might find him. So she realises she's talking to one of the common men, the lowest of the low, and a murderer at that. And she's saying, you won't find my husband here. He doesn't mix with the likes of you. To which the murderer says, he's a traitor. The son, again speaking up for his father, says, thou liest, you lie, thou shag-haired villain. This language tells us that the murderer is clearly a very scruffy and unkempt individual. He is shag-haired, in other words, he's got shaggy hair and probably an unkempt beard. The murderer says, what, you egg, you fry of treachery? It's a great insult, that, isn't it? You egg. An egg or a fry. Fry is the offspring of a fish. Obviously, chickens hatch out of eggs. These are both words which are emphasising just how young the son is. And then we're told in the very brutally direct stage direction, kills him. So at that point, the murderer stabs the child. I think it is incredibly brutal of Shakespeare to have the death of a child on stage, and the fact that the child is killed first, even before the mother. But I think that just adds to the brutality and the horror of the situation, in that Lady Macduff is forced to watch Macbeth's revenge being enacted in front of her by his assassins, by having to watch her child or one of her children murdered. The son, with his dying breath, says, he has killed me, mother. Run away, I pray you. And we're told that Lady Macduff exits the stage crying murder and pursued by the murderers. It also says in the stage direction with her son, meaning that the murderers are carrying his body from the stage. And so, just to emphasise a point that I made in the previous scene, Macbeth is now indirectly, because he's not done it himself, a murderer of women and children. Of course, we're led to believe that many people are dying under Macbeth's reign, but here he's given the direct instruction that they must die. He's not had the guts to kill them himself. And so we could, as an audience and as readers, see these actions as cowardly, and they further emphasise his fall from greatness. So that concludes the analysis of Act 4, Scene 2. In the next tutorial, we're going to have a look at Act 4, Scene 3, which is one of the key scenes in this act. There are only 3 scenes in total in Act 4, and it deals with Macduff's arrival in England and a very important conversation that takes place between Macduff and Malcolm. So join me for that next time.